Story 1. This happened to a coworker years ago. We were tellers at a local bank. Every Christmas we had tiny candy canes to give to customers' children. One man came in with his transactions and requested cash back. Teller 1 was helping him. She proceeded to give him his cash in a $100 bill and the candy cane. For his child. He looked at her and asked, "Can I have that broken up?" She then crushed the candy cane to a pulp with my stapler and handed it back to him. Teller 2 just looked at her. And after the man said thanks and drove off, said, "I think he meant the $100 bill. I will remember this story forever." Edit. Thank you for the award. This is my favorite story from working there. We had a good group. I still love those people. Story 2. I've worked in restaurants since I was 16. When I bring someone to a table, or set down a drink or plate of food, I always say enjoy. So when a man asked me where the washroom was and I directed him, I told him enjoy. Story 3. I work in a prison. Occasionally an inmate will say, "All right, officer, emo kid, have a good night. Drive home safe." I reply, "Thanks, you too." He is serving multiple life sentences. This is my first silver. Thank you. Story 4. I once saw a flustered young lawyer address a judge as "Oh Lord." He was a devout churchgoer and had fallen into a prayer cadence as he nervously argued. Everyone pretended it had not happened. Story 5. When talking with family, we always end our calls with "I love you." I was on a call with my longtime assistant, and as the call ended, without thinking I said, "I lo," and stopped, horrified because I couldn't think how to finish it. Thank God she had a sense of humor. She said, "Ah, come on now, you can say it. Go ahead. Tell me you love me." So I did, and we laughed about it for years. Story 6. Well, I accidentally brushed against a random woman at Walmart, thinking she was my wife. Story 7. Calling your wife mom is pretty bad. I did that once almost 20 years ago, and the cringe has not lessened over time. We never had children, so no one else was calling her mom. That was super awkward. Story 8. I had a coworker who would jokingly call our chief Big Daddy behind his back. We were all working a little late one night and she said, "Hey, Big Daddy," as he walked in. To her credit, she owned it and now calls him that in regular conversation. It is still weird. Story 9. I once called an older female coworker mom because she kind of looks and gives off the same vibe as my mother. Story 10. I am one of those never save numbers in my phone kind of guys. When I was in the army, I was stationed somewhere with a different area code and I started talking to a local girl. Things were getting heated one night over text, so we exchanged raunchy messages. I was not paying attention for a moment and sent a message to the wrong person. My sergeant replied, "All right, I am not really into that, but make sure you show up to formation in the morning." Story 11. At Dollar Tree the other day, my boyfriend walked up to the cashier, and she said almost immediately, "How was your meal?" Then she said, "Oh, wrong job." Story 12. It was my mom. She was in a meeting and not paying attention. When someone asked her a question, she replied, "What's that, honey?" It made me laugh for a long time. Story 13. My old boss and my husband's names were one letter apart. I worked in a daycare, and the owner and staff often texted each other to update on the children, address parent concerns, and ask general questions. My husband worked the third shift and I worked the first, so we did not see each other much and most of our conversations were by text. On my first week, I rushed into work and texted my husband the usual message I sent when I arrived. "Hey babe, I'm here. I hope your night was as awesome as you are. I love you so much. Your dinner is in the slow cooker." When I went on break, I checked my phone. Nothing from my husband, but my boss had replied, "Love you too. Moi." I was confused until I looked back at the messages and realized I had sent her the text meant for my husband. I changed her contact name to boss after that. Thank God she had a good sense of humor. Story 14. My friend was on the toilet when someone knocked, and she said, "Come in." Edit. Thanks for the silver, kind stranger. Story 15. I accidentally said "I love you" when I hung up on a work call. Story 16. I am a teacher. I unthinkingly scolded my dog the other day. Follow the directions. We stared at each other for a moment while I realized how ridiculous I sounded. Story 17. These days I rarely talk on the phone to anyone who isn't family, so saying love you, bye is a standard phone call ending. We had some issues at our house last year, and I am pretty sure I told two contractors and the insurance adjuster I love them. Thanks to everyone who posted to let me know I am not the only one. I love you all. Story 18. I am a dental hygienist. My patient was a man who had just turned 91 the day before. Instead of saying happy belated birthday, like a normal human being, I accidentally and very loudly said, happy last birthday. The look on his face was unforgettable. This was also my second day at my new job. To answer everyone's question about whether he is still alive, I do not know. This happened about 2 months ago, so I will not be scheduled to see him until sometime in July. Fingers crossed he comes back, or I will feel even worse. Also, thank you for the gold and silver. Please put that toward a charity of your choosing instead. My idiocy does not need rewarding. Story 19. I called the pediatrician the veterinarian for the first year or two of our child's life. I even did it in the office and over the phone with staff. We had pets long before we had children. Thankfully, they said they found it charming and that I was not the first to make the mistake. Story 20. My husband has mixed up my name and his sister's name more than once. He also calls our children by the pet's name. Story 21. You walk up to the wrong car and panic when you cannot unlock it. Story 22. I went on autopilot and came terrifyingly close to giving my short female employees the noogies I give my daughters. Story 23. A colleague gave me a lift home once. When he stopped to let me out of the car, I leaned in for a kiss because that is what I would do with my wife. Thankfully, he was looking the other way. Story 24. Once I was at the airport and went to get a sandwich. I stood at the counter and asked the worker for a turkey sandwich, which he prepared. He handed it to me, and his coworker noticed it had not been microwaved. The coworker reached over the glass display cases to take it to the microwave. I did not understand why he extended his hand, so I smiled and shook it. He laughed, pointed at my food, and said he needed to heat it. I felt embarrassed. Story 25. I once went to the wrong floor of my apartment building and tried to open the wrong apartment. I stood there jiggling the doorknob for a few minutes before realizing what I had done and bolting up the stairs before the resident came out to see what the hell was happening. Story 26. On the way back from a client meeting with one of the partners, he was not paying attention when the light turned green. I said, "Hey, babe, you have to go." Then I died. Story 27. If you are a teacher, do not call students by the names of older brothers or sisters who were previously in your class. Thank you for the silver. Story 28. I called my housekeeper Daddy instead of Darcy. It was an autocorrect mistake in a text, but I didn't notice for 24 hours when I realized she never texted me back. I was mortified, but she thought it was hilarious. When she texted me 2 weeks later, her opening line was, "Who's your daddy?" I actually lost my mind in a meeting reading that. She is the sweetest older lady, and now my nickname for her is Daddy. Story 29. I handed a $20 bill to an officer instead of my license last night. I was the designated driver. We left a friend's house and sat in the car. Before I could start the car, an officer pulled up and shone a light on us. I walked to where he could see me from a distance and asked if I could approach. When I asked what was going on, he said he couldn't discuss it yet and asked for identification. Nervously, I handed him a $20 bill. He looked at me like I was an idiot, which I don't blame him for, and said he did not need the money. We talked for a bit while they searched for an armed perpetrator. He walked around my car and looked inside. After identifying everyone, he apologized for the trouble and told us to have a good night. Story 30. Ending a phone call with a client or colleague by saying love you. Story 31. Using your work greeting when answering your personal phone. Story 32. When a customer is leaving the restaurant and he says to me, "Have a good night, love you," I God help me say, "Love you too. Take care." We spend a silent moment looking at each other and both turn away at the same time, never to discuss it again. Story 33. My boss is old enough to be my dad, although his kids are younger than me. Sometimes he reminds me of my dad, and I almost said, "Oh, Chip," in a sarcastic, disagreeing tone. Once, during a disagreement about our other leader, he slipped and called me his daughter's name while giving me advice. He was not telling me I had to do what he said, but explaining why he thought I should. It made me feel that he was genuinely giving me the best advice he could. I still did not agree, but I took his advice. I know this is not exactly an answer to the question, but life has been a little hard lately, and typing out a nice moment made me feel a bit better. So I am going to leave it. Story 34. Does putting vegetables in the washing machine instead of the fridge count? Hey everyone, thanks for the likes. I am so happy right now. Also, thanks to the kind internet stranger for giving me my first gold. Story 35. Toss the plate of pizza rolls onto the couch rather than onto your phone. Story 36. I have a friend who used to work as a nursery school teacher and then took a job in an office. The transition was not easy. Apparently, she started her first presentation by saying, "All right, everyone, quiet down, fingers on lips." She tells the story because about half the people in the room, including her immediate boss, did it instinctively. Story 37. Every day after work, I text my significant other to say whether I am going straight home or not. The last person I texted was my boss. I sent her the message, "Baby, I am free from work. I am headed to the store to get groceries. I love you so much." Imagine my surprise when my boss, who I am fortunately close with, texted back, laughing out loud, "Good girl?" I was so confused. I opened the conversation and realized what I had sent. I sank into a puddle of embarrassment in the middle of the grocery store. We all laughed about it the next day. Story 38. One of my soldiers called me dad in boot camp. It was pretty hard not to laugh. Story 39. At the cinema, when I got my nachos, the guy at the counter said, "Enjoy your film." I replied, "You too. Holy Jesus Christ on a motorbike. Thanks for the silver." Story 40. I was out working with my dad once when his client called and asked for rates. I told him, and when he said, "Okay, thank you," I replied, "Love you," and hung up. It was strange. We had to clean his carpet the next day, laughing. He was about 6'2" and weighed 300 pounds of pure black badassery. As we were leaving, he stopped me and asked if I had talked to him the day before. I said yes. He said very gently, "I love you too," and then lost it. Story 41. Aware, boat, brave, disarm, deliver, steer, cow, tan, carpenter, 10. Story 42. I get my children's names mixed up or call them by the pets' names. Thank you to everyone who upvoted and shared their stories. Sorry I have not replied to everyone, but I have upvoted you all. I am glad to see I am not alone. Virtual high five. Story 43. Accidentally threw my phone in the air and tried to catch it with my mouth as one would do with a grape. The shower had sprayed water into the toilet bowl, so I wiped it off with a reusable towel and then threw the towel in the toilet. I saw a cockroach on the ground while I was on the phone wearing only pants. I did not step on it. Instead, I crushed it with my palm, thought, "Well, I got this far," picked it up, and threw it in the bushes. At robotics, the protocol is to yell safety before using a heavy tool. Out of sleep deprivation, I yelled, "Good morning," and turned on the massive saw. I immediately turned it off without cutting the piece and collapsed laughing. The list goes on. When I was little, I walked around the house with a go-gurt and thought it was fun to hit random furniture with it before opening it. I must have been the only one surprised when it burst and coated my bed in strawberry yogurt. More recently, we had chocolate milk in the refrigerator and I was thirsty. My brother and I were both in the kitchen when I grabbed the bottle and opened it. I saw the label saying, "Shake well before drinking." So I shook it without closing the cap and gave my brother an unexpected shower. Later that same week, my brother was making orange juice in the press and was 2 or 3 orange halves in before he noticed he had forgotten to put a container underneath, so juice spilled onto the table. I call these incidents brain lag. Story 44. When someone says happy birthday and you accidentally say thank you, you too. Story 45. Real parents sometimes call their spouse mom or dad when they are very focused on their children and begin to enjoy doing so deliberately. Story 46. Tub. March. Wrong. Profit. Late. Direful. Library. Chubby. Unite. Deserted. Story 47. I got my haircut once, and I was paying at the register. The woman ringing me up gave me my card back and then said, "I hope you enjoy your haircut." Without thinking, I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You too." Story 48. You get into the wrong car and realize you are sitting next to a complete stranger who looks very confused. Or you adjust your breasts in a window reflection and realize someone is inside. Story 49. When I am at work and start getting angry at my coworker, I call him by the name of my ex. Story 50. Hello, Mr. Johnson. This is Richard calling from XYZ Incorporated. How are you today? Well, not so great. I am driving to my wife's funeral right now. I am so sorry. Well, I just wanted to follow up quickly to make sure you received the email I sent the other day. Story 51. I was once pulled over for speeding. As the officer was leaving, he said, "Try to drive more safely." I replied, "You too," and immediately regretted it. Story 52. Putting kisses at the end of a text to your boss. Story 53. I once tried to hold my sister's hand while I was driving because I do that with my wife all the time. Story 54. I sent the wrong text to the wrong person. I meant to send a teammate a message about doing their share of the presentation work, but I accidentally sent it to my boyfriend. He was very confused. Story 55. Calling your boss babe, honey, or any pet name you use for your significant other. Story 56. I call my husband babe. My brother's name is Dave. Apparently my brain thinks rhyming words are the same, so I have been interchanging the two with horrifying and embarrassing frequency. Story 57. My friends and I have a thing where we say "hurt me more daddy" when we beat each other in a game. It's been this way for years. Recently we were playing at a Magic the Gathering table, and the newest player played a counterspell that ended my combo. Out of habit I said "hurt me more daddy." The whole table went silent. The new player was a priest, and with a straight face he said he preferred to be called father. Story 58. My cousin is an attorney. At Christmas dinner a few years ago, he started the blessing by saying "Your Honor." Story 59. Using the words bro or dude with a customer or in a professional conversation. Story 60. I was on the receiving end. I said, "My grandfather died in September." The woman I was talking to, on autopilot, said, "Oh, cool." Story 61. I called my former boss Mom. We often had heated discussions at work, and during one particularly frustrating meeting I said, "But Mom." Story 62. I was leaving an interview that had gone well. The hiring manager gestured toward the door with her arm, which my brain read as an open arm gesture inviting a hug, and I instinctively went in for one. I did not get that job. Story 63. This story is not about me. I am still in the last year of high school, but my older brother once called his boss Papa, meaning father, instead of patron, meaning boss. That is one of the reasons he no longer works there. Story 64. I was a teaching assistant, and while on the phone with another teacher he instinctively said, "I love you, bye," before we ended the call. The next time I saw him he was mortified, but I laughed and said, "Love you too." Story 65. I accidentally called a nurse mom because she looked very similar to my mother. Story 66. I got rather drunk at my female friend's house and accidentally called her babe while we were cooking. I am a girl and I am dating a boy. I have no idea why I did that. Please stop telling me it is normal and that everyone calls their friends babe. If I called all my friends babe, I would not have posted this or thought it was awkward. Not everyone talks like that or is a girly girl. Story 67. I was at an airport buying gifts because I had forgotten to buy them earlier. I picked up some chocolate and waited in the queue. I heard the people behind the counter saying, "Have a good flight," and thought, "Don't say you too," because they work there and obviously aren't going to fly home. When it was my turn to pay, everything went well and the cashier said, "Thanks," "Sir, have a nice flight." I replied, "Yeah, you too." I knew I couldn't stop mid-word, so I finished and walked away quickly. Story 68. I accidentally called my husband the cute nickname I use for our dog, using the same voice. We both pretended it did not happen. Story 69. A boss I had once was the same age and build as my father. I call my father Daddy because we're Southern. You can see where this is going. Story 70. I work as a cook. I was at a bar after work, and there had been a fight 5 minutes before I arrived. Officers went around asking for statements. An officer asked, "Did you witness the fight?" After an 11-hour shift and half a beer, I replied, "No, chef." Story 71. I gave the waiter €20 and said, "Keep the change." The bill was €35. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.